Hey, you're watching GearWire.com. I'm Owen O'Malley, and we're here at Winter NAMM 2010 with Wyn Guitars founder and sole employee, Randall Fulmer. Thanks for joining us.
I'm the president, and I sand all the boards.
Yeah,
I do them both.
Does that get overwhelming?
No, I actually really enjoy it. I like it. It's I can keep total quality control on everything.
Cool.
I have my days when I'm tired of sanding, though. I admit that.
Yeah. So how'd you get started in luthiery? How'd you get the bug?
I'll tell you, there's a real specific way. I was in a little rock band, and I had a 6-string guitar, and I wanted another guitar. I wanted a 12-string, and my parents said, no, you already have a guitar. And I said, well, how about if I buy the wood? Can I make the 12-string guitar? And I think it was so out of left field, they just couldn't say no. And so there it was, and there's James Lomenzo that just arrived.
Oh, right on.
And so I started making guitars and selling them to my friends, and it seemed like the best magic trick ever to put that much time into something and then have it turn into a musical instrument. And then I did it as a hobby for a lot of years and became an animator at Disney, at Walt Disney feature animation. But I kept making guitars, and at some point I thought, I've drawn enough cartoons, it's time to get back to making instruments. And so for about the last 4 years, I've exclusively worked on bass guitars.
So your luthiery knowledge, skills, all self-taught?
Pretty much self-taught, and just reading a lot. There's amazing DVDs on the around these days, and just observing and trying things, trial and error, and repeating what works and skipping what doesn't work. It's kind of like that.
Okay. So your first project was a guitar, but now it's primarily basses or solely basses?
Solely basses. I find that, in general, I'm stereotyping now, but in general, guitar players are more interested in an old Les Paul or an old Stratocaster, and I understand that. Bass players are more interested in an individual instrument, and also I find that acoustically, the woods that I love to use, the hardwoods, really have an impact in the sound on a bass guitar.
Yeah, more so on a guitar?
Than on a guitar.
Would you say it's more challenging to craft a bass as opposed to a guitar?
I think they both have different sets of problems, but I'm just having the time of my life. I totally love doing bass guitars, and there's a lot of variety in scale lengths and wood types and tones and things that different players are going after. So it's nice to satisfy those wants.
So the electronics that you use in your bass, what are they, and how'd you kind of come to find them?
I actually had bought a bass from Kerry Nordstrand at one point and really loved the bass and the sound of it, and I started using Nordstrand pickups pretty much. I've used Bartolini, I've used a few other kinds, but I've settled in on Nordstrand with the thought that as a variable I'm going to change the Tonewoods and keep the electronics fairly consistent. I use either an Aguilar preamp, or I've started using a Nordstrand preamp as well. But if I keep that consistent, I know that's a given. And then I really, to go after different sounds that are being asked for, I can vary the wood.
And do you have a particular tone wood that's like your personal favorite tone wood?
Yeah, Wenge. Wenge is my favorite. It's because it's deep, throaty, big. It makes the guitar sound very big. And it's pure and very clear and clean, but then there's a point when you really crank the volume where it really has attitude. It has a growl that I don't get from other woods. So I do neck through basses, and I, in general, like to use a lot of Wenge on the neck.
Have you ever done bolt-on basses?
I have not. I have not. So I cannot speak to bolt-on basses.
Right on. You have to wait for somebody to ask you for one?
Yeah.
So from the point where someone actually sort of places an order and specs out a bass, well, what's that process like? So to actually do people come to you with they know exactly what they want, or do you kind of work with people?
It really varies. Yeah. Some people are extremely specific, down to what woods they want to use, what their favorite fretboard wood is, the scale length, everything. Others can, it's a helpful starting point to be able to point to a certain bass and say, that's kind of the tone I'm looking for.
Yeah, okay.
And then I've made numbers of basses, so if somebody can drop by my shop, they can sit down and play many different basses, and it's not words then, it's really, you've heard a sound that you like.
Right.
And that cuts through it a lot.
Cool. And I guess and as you're the sole luthier, so it seems like it's a very personal process.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I really enjoy collaboration and working directly with people, so they get, in the end, when I give them their guitar, they got exactly what they wanted.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And how long is that process from when they sort of like first, finalize the design to when it's in their hands?
As I've gotten busier, it's stretched out a little bit, but I try to turn it around in 6 months, if I can. But I always give a specific time, and I get it at that point. I'm not a guy that wants to give them 4 months and take a year.
Yeah, right.
I like to really stick to my schedules.
Cool. So we're about to hear and interview James Lomenzo.
About to go.
Do you want to talk real briefly about the experience working on his bass in particular?
James just had seen my website and is a friend of a friend. Word of mouth really works nicely, and he thought I was making great stuff and said, "How'd you like to make me a bass?" And I said, "You bet." That's what I said. And so he came over, and he's a guy who had very specific ideas about what he wanted.
Right.
And I had him bring over 3 basses, of which he really liked the neck on one. He liked certain things of each one of them. And it was sort of like, maybe I can make a bass that really fit him ergonomically and was the best of all worlds.
Right.
I bet this interview is about to end.
Yeah, I think probably pretty soon.
Yeah.
Maybe we can pick it up afterwards.
All right.
But thanks very much.